Hello all, my name is Alvin. So our presentation is on Chapter 9, Opening Profile, Staffing Company Operations in Emerging Markets. So after my presentation, Jackson McKenzie and Amal Gracie Kurian will be doing their part. This chapter describes the challenges involved in assigning, recruiting, and retaining suitable managers to staff operations in emerging markets, where the increasing demand by both foreign and local companies outstripping the supply. In the year 2015, Global Relocation Trend Survey took place, in which human resource staffs from 143 multinational companies were asked to identify the top three countries that represented new assignment locations for them. China, Brazil, and the UAE were those top three countries. One of the major challenges faced by the managers are staff subsidiaries. Foreign firms wish to expand their investments in such economies which are competing for what talent is available with both local companies and other global companies. The shortage of upper-level managers change according to different countries. In Brazil, staff availability for lower-level management to middle-level management is high. However, upper-level management is low. In India, lower level is high, middle level is low. In Russia, all managements are low because of planned economy, whereas in China, the entry level management is high and the other levels are low. Managers in developing markets are motivated by factors that are a function of their culture, business practices, and personal goals, and usually what is expected in the home office. Successful companies offer more than a good salary and make up four distinguishing characteristics that provide meaning for potential recruits in emerging markets. So, first characteristic is brand, which is known for its excellence and with a distinctive competence in a particular area. Second characteristic is purpose, that breaking into new markets with new models and strategy. The third characteristic, opportunity, means a company that provides fast tracking training and career path for new recruits. By the characteristic culture, it means that a company that has an organizational culture of openness and transparency for employees with support for their work and career development. Next, we move to the role of international human resource management, that is IHRM, in global strategy implementation. Some of the major challenges that human resource faces in the global arena are enhancing global business strategy. A major concern for managers to decide on a global business strategy is the trade-off between global integration and local responsiveness, aligning HR issues with business strategy. A business strategy is a future-oriented plan for creating and maximizing competitive advantages to accomplish the organization's mission. To successfully execute that strategy, each function within the business needs to align its departmental strategy with the overall business strategy. Designing and leading change. In order to design the product and lead the change, the firms have to become more sophisticated in the best practices for organizational change management. Building global corporate culture. Before creating global organizational cultures, the managers should know the current state of firms in cultural development. Staffing organization with global leaders. Staffing organization should be done with global leaders who are able to handle complicated projects. Next, strategic human resource management. It is a two-way role of human resource management in both helping to determine strategy and implementing it. One of the companies which uses strategic human resource management is IBM. IBM also uses its global workforce to convey and implement its strategy of a globally integrated company. The majority of employees of IBM are in countries like India, Japan, Britain, and Brazil. The company uses various staffing modes and considers international assignments important to its goal of global integration. Staffing for global operation. Staffing is the process of finding the right worker with appropriate qualifications or experience and recruiting them to fill a job position or role. There are several modes of staffing. First one, ethnocentric staffing approach, which is also known as parent country nationals. It means that the company hire people from their parent country to fill positions all over the world. For example, if the company want to fill an executive role in a foreign country, they could relocate one of their existing employees who's permanent resident of their parent country or hire a person from the parent country who lives in the host country or who wants to live in the host country. Polycentric staffing approach, which means the company hire locals to fill their positions in the host country. The organization could advertise on local job boards or create a contract with a local recruitment agency. Next is regiocentric staffing approach, which means host country nationals. It means that hiring or transferring people within the same region to fill open position. Next staffing mode is global staffing approach, where the best managers are recruited from within or outside of the company, regardless of nationality. The third country nationals staffing mode has been used by some time by many European multinationals. The last staffing mode is impatriates, which was used to provide a linking pin between the company's headquarters and local host subsidiaries. Next, we move to the mini case Tata staffing challenges in the United States. Tata is an Indian company which sends thousands of employees abroad to work, which operates in 43 countries, that provides IT services, business solutions, and outsourcing. It is India's largest industrial conglomerate. In the year 2008, they decided to buy a facility in Milford, Ohio. The strategy was to compete with IBM and Accenture. In the year 2011, TCS had 450 employees, in which all were Americans. It was difficult to get Indian visa, where the Tata's ethnocentric staff mode didn't work. Company planned to hire further 500 plus employees, which made a strong global workforce with 215,000 employees. Factors affecting the staffing practices in the United States include the Ohio government's ban, which was in September 2010. It was difficult to find sufficient numbers of qualified engineers in the United States. TCS faced a cost increase of around 7 times for a US worker compared with an Indian employee for the same job. TCS had a tailored employee value proposition for each of its major markets. The company understands the paramount interest to its managers in India. In China, its managers are primarily interested in opportunities for personal development, and in United States, managers look for interesting jobs. Next is advantages of global staffing approach. It provides a greater pool of qualified and willing applicants from which to choose. Third country nationals are used to manage subsidiaries. It's more flexible. It can adaptable to a situation. It have bilingual or multilingual skills. Next is cost effective. It's easy to transfer and pay managers from some countries than from others because their pay scale and benefits packages are lower.
An expatriate is a person residing in a country other than the native country. In common usage, the term often refers to professionals, skilled workers, or artists taking positions outside their home country, either independently or sent abroad by the employees. So, an important responsibility of international HR managers is that of managing expatriates. Those employees they are sent to position in other countries, whether from the headquarters countries or third countries. Most multinationals underestimate the importance of human resource function in selection, training, acceleration, and evaluation of expatriates. However, although the number of employers sending staff abroad is on the rise, only half actually have policies in place to govern these assignments. The research shows that. In addition, HR managers are not aware that expatriates are unhappy until they find out they are losing valuable experienced managers to a different country. Nowadays, employees are ready to work in a different country rather than their host country because it will be benefiting them in different ways. Like they can broaden the personal experience, they will be meeting new people, they will be interacting with people with different culture, and also they will be having different work experience rather than from the home country. Definitely, the work experience in a different country will be entirely different from the country he'll be coming, so he can acquire a multi-dimensional work experience. He can also use those experience in a different country when he's having a chance to get to work on different countries. Working in a different country will be helping an employee to have a better career opportunities because everyone will be knowing that he'll be familiar with a different world culture. He'll be good to know the culture of a different place and so on. There are different factors which are considered by the employer when selecting an employee for expatriation. Main thing, the success of an employee in the domestic settings. If an employee can perform well in domestic settings, he also can perform well in a different country. Also, if an employee shows culture empathy, flexibility in work, and if he is having a good motivational state, he'll be fit to work on a different country. Employers will be always look on to these factors when considering an employee to send abroad. We have a clear data given by Mansoor Javdan about what a successful expatriate will be possessing. The number one on his list is the intellectual capital, skills, understanding, and cognitive complexity of the employee. If the employee is good enough with the knowledge of his work, he will be performing well in his home country as well as in his country where he is sent. The second thing, the psychological capital, ability to perform good in host country. So if the moral of the employee is good and if he is ready to work on a different country, he'll be happy to continue. If he's not ready to work on a different country and if he's forced to work on a different country, the performance may not be good of that employee and the program will be a failure. And finally, the social capital, the ability of the employee to build a good relation with the local stakeholders. It can be on his host country or on the country he's going to work. Because if he can perform, if he can have a good relation with the local stakeholders of his home country where he is currently working, he can use his knowledge to make the good relation with local stakeholders on his host country and can contribute good to his business. Next thing I will be discussing about some of the reasons which will be resulting in the failure of expatriate programs. Even though companies consider many programs before sending an employee to outside, still there will be troubles or something that cause the expatriate program to be a failure. First thing in that, maybe the selection of employees may based on the headquarters criteria rather than assignments needed on the host country. And secondly, inadequate preparation, training, orientation prior to assignment, and also alienation or lack of support from headquarters. If an employee did not get a proper support from his headquarters, he'll not be able to perform well in a different country. And also there will be problem with the individuals when they are moving away from their family. They will be having emotional problems and other psychological problems. And finally, programs for career support and repatriation for the employees who is working abroad. All employees have the responsibility to provide good career support to those employees who are asked to go abroad for working. If the company is not focusing on that, definitely the program for expatriation will be a failure. Considering many cases where the expatriate programs are a failure, there are different ways a company can have a good expatriate program. So for that, there are many things to be considered. So it is important to note that expatriate's performance depends on the team he works. So an adequate global team performance management is required in a company where expatriate employees are there. So HR managers in the host countries can make teams of an expatriate employees with local employees, so he can perform well. HR managers can also improve the team performance by facilitating face-to-face interaction between all employees, understanding what makes the interaction between employees easier. So, for example, employees from Netherlands often prefer formal process, whereas Chinese employees prefer a flexible process of interaction. So, if the HR manager can understand how each employee will be confident enough to 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 do his work, and if the HR manager can act accordingly, he can build a good team to perform. Now let's consider Now let's consider the expatriate performance management from MNEs of 5 different nations. First, we can consider AMT, an American company. Their goals are short term and long term. They'll be having annual appraisal. The performance appraisal includes annual appraisal, open feedback interview, and the training and development does not have a clear connection between performance result and career development. Same as AMT's training and development, Hitachi of Japanese also have no clear connection between their performance result and career development, but they have the goal for self-setting and finalized goal for self-setting, and it is finalized by the host country manager. And also the performance appraisal is through a one-way feedback discussion and through training programs. Now let's look onto the importance of training and development of expatriates. Training is very important since cross-culture issues might arise. So it is clear that preparation and training for cross-cultural interactions are critical. A global relocation trend survey revealed that attrition rates for expatriates were more than double the rate of non-expatriates. It is also found that 21% of expatriates left the companies during the assignments, and another 23% left within a year of returning from the assignment. Also, we have to consider that failure of expatriate programs can be very expensive. The direct cost alone of a failed expatriate assignment is estimated to be from $200,000 to $1.2 million. The indirect cost may be greater depending on the expatriate position. And also, relation with the host country government and customers may be damaged, resulting in a loss of market share and also a poor reception from future PCNs. And also, we have to note that only 20% company give importance to cross-culture training according to different surveys. So it is very important to have some training and development for expatriate. So let's see what are the benefits for giving cross-culture training for the expatriate employees. Cross-culture training help expatriate to know more about the country he have to work. So he will be coming from a different culture and exposing to a new culture. So there will be difference in the culture. So he'll be definitely knowing that each country has a unique culture and he have to perform according to that culture. So since if he can get a good cross-culture training, it will be helpful for him to improve the interaction with the people of the host country. He can interact in a manner how the people in the host country interact between each other. It will also help to clear misunderstanding and also help to know about inappropriate behavior so he can avoid all those things. And the another two important things will be cross culture training will be help to reduce the culture shock because the employee will be exposed to a new culture, entirely new culture, so everything will be new to him. If he is having a good cross culture training, those shocks can be avoided. And also the sub culture shock, same like culture shock, if the employee is having a good knowledge about the culture of the host country, somehow he can manage the difference of his culture with the host country. It is really important to remember that training programs like staffing approaches should be designed with the company's strategies in mind. So it means that training for expatriates should consider company goals. Although it is probably impractical to break down those programs into many variations, it is feasible at least to consider the relative level or stage of globalization that a firm achieved. Also, we have to note that there will be potential problems with expatriates and local staff. So companies who are sending an employee to abroad should do something to reduce the problem with the expatriate employee and the local staff. So by doing something like relationship building and making employees to share their knowledge and providing opportunities for the cultural adaptability, and also by providing encouragement to local innovation for the local staff, to an extent the potential problems with expatriates can be decreased. Also, to end with, we also have to provide a proper compensation for the expatriate employees because they will be facing with different problems psychologically, emotionally, and also physically, because they'll be new to the food culture. Also, they'll be having difficulty in contacting with their family and beloved ones. So compensating an expatriate employees is also really important. So so Mackenzie will be continuing with the presentation.
Hi everyone, my name is Mac, and I just want to say thanks to Alwyn and Amal for their presentations. I'm going to be discussing a couple of different cases here today, and the first one is management in action, looking at Starbucks and their abilities to retain and train local managers in Beijing when they expanded into China. So, Starbucks has a global presence. They operate in all 50 states in the United States with 7,087 company operated stores, and they operate in 65 countries outside of the United States, being company owned in Australia, Canada, Chile, China, Germany, Ireland, Thailand, the UK, and Singapore. So, Starbucks ran into some difficulties when they expanded into Beijing. Quote, when we first started in Beijing, people didn't know who we were and it was rough finding sites. Now landlords are coming to us. So the main focus of this case was looking at how Starbucks had to adapt their training styles and how they were able to retain global managers and local managers in Beijing to run their Starbucks stores. People didn't really know who Starbucks was, and they had to offer different differentiated products and change their penetration tactics and look at how they can attract young people and show that Starbucks was a good company to work for. One of the issues in Beijing was the demand for managers with experience far outweighs the supply of managers with experience, especially under a capitalist system. Starbucks is obviously run out of the United States, which is one of the most capitalist countries in the world, if not the most. So when they expand to different countries like China, which is a communist country, it becomes difficult to train employees when they're completely used to a different economic system and social structure. And lastly, cultural differences, of course, go hand in hand with that. Management styles and techniques are different, communication styles and techniques are different. So all of this comes into play when Starbucks is trying to retain and hire managers. It becomes a more difficult task than, say, if they were opening a new store in Canada where it's fairly similar to the United States. So looking at Starbucks brand and its values, well, firstly, Starbucks is seen as Western pop culture to young Beijingers. So once Starbucks was able to make a name for themselves and start opening up stores and giving exposure to young people, they became more popular because Beijingers, especially the young ones, sort of idolize America and certain aspects of the culture. So it, you know, helps in the long run retain new customers and expose them to Starbucks products. So Starbucks also offers management recruits the opportunity to train in Seattle, Washington, giving them exposure to the company's informal culture. This is one of the ways Starbucks bridges the social and cultural gap of training management for local managers in Beijing. They give them exposure to the American way of life and the values that Starbucks has instilled in their stores and employees over time, like the informal culture, good wages and training opportunities, and career development. Another core value to Starbucks is providing their employees with a good working environment, respect, and also a company with a good reputation. And lastly, dignity motivates more than anything else. So Starbucks really focuses on training their managers and their employees well, providing them with respect, and good things will happen if you respect your employees and pay them well. That's one of the main draws to companies like Starbucks that have a good reputation. So looking at Starbucks as a multinational corporation, multinational corporations want well-trained employees who have a global perspective. Starbucks prioritizes training international employees in the US to ensure Starbucks values are instilled, and this also gives recruits exposure to the company's home country's culture and work practices. When recruits go to, say, Seattle, they might experience culture shock, which is a state of disorientation and anxiety about not knowing how to behave in an unfamiliar culture. But this is really beneficial for these recruits and potential managers to experience because when they go back to Beijing or wherever they're from, they have that global perspective and different ways of life might not seem so foreign to them because they've had that experience and they better understand how to serve different people from different backgrounds. So the next case study I'm going to be looking at is Kelly's assignment in Japan. So a quick case summary. Kelly is a program manager for a new startup internet services company in Tokyo. She was offered a position for marketing manager. She was offered full compensation packages and was able to bring her entire family to Tokyo with her. However, she spoke no Japanese. So Kelly's married and has 2 kids, and they previously lived a comfortable life in Boston. Upon deciding to move to Tokyo, Kelly and her family experienced culture shock. From work life, social norms, schooling, and housing, everything was different. This case illustrates how societal norms are different, and when doing business, it is critical to understand the person you're dealing with and their culture and provide them with respect. So, looking at American versus Japanese culture, we can see that American from this chart is very individualistic, whereas Japanese is very collectivist. So, with preferred values, for example, Americans value freedom, individual personality, personal enterprise, and achievement. They see truth as one truth, education as individual autonomy and rights, and the list goes on. Whereas if you look at Japanese culture, their preferred values are more welfare of the group and a cooperative endeavor. They're more looking out for collective values rather than individuals. Truth can be several truths. Education is respect for tradition and authority. And again, it's very contrasted to the American ways of life. So applying that to the case, one of the major mistakes Kelly made when she was pitching her sale to her Japanese counterparts was not accepting Michio, who was the businessman she was dealing with. She didn't accept his business card, which to a Japanese person is very important and must be accepted with respect and admired because it has all of their accomplishments and basically who they are on that card without having to verbally say it. So in American culture, even from personal experience, when someone gives me a business card, you kind of quickly glance at it and stick it into your wallet for future reference. But again, in Japan, that's seen as a big sign of disrespect. So Kelly made that mistake, and that affected her sale and resulted in her losing the sale. Another difference with culture in this case was Kelly asked some of her Japanese coworkers to create a presentation for her for the new account that she was trying to service. However, she wasn't understanding the cultural differences. She assumed if she told them to do something, they would do it. And her German coworkers and other American coworkers did just that. They did the presentation and took individual liberty to do that presentation. However, the Japanese were reluctant to go ahead with their presentation because there wasn't all of their coworkers with them, and they didn't want to individually take charge over a presentation that they saw was a group effort, and more of a collectivist team effort. So, looking at the first case question, explain the clashes of culture, customs, and expectations that occurred in this situation. So, as we know, culture plays a huge role in business, and we have to understand and respect different people's culture. One of the main mistakes that Kelly made was not understanding the Japanese culture before she moved. She spoke little to no Japanese, and she really just didn't understand the social norms to doing business there, which impeded her success. That goes back to the individual versus collectivist. Another, I guess, issue with her tactics was the American attitude of get right down to business. Kelly expected if she told her Japanese coworkers to do something, they would do it, but they didn't want to get right down to business because they wanted to consult with their team members first. Same with Michio. Kelly was trying to jump right into the presentation, but Michio wasn't eager to jump right into business. He more wanted to work into things slowly and see if they would be a good business partner relationship rather than just assume that they would work and he would give her her business. She also expressed a lack of patience, and there was a language barrier, which again goes back to different cultural values, the American attitude getting right down to business. However, not speaking the same language makes it really difficult. Another interesting part of the case was the fact that the Japanese expected Kelly to be a man, and because when she met them in person, she wasn't a man, she wasn't afforded as much respect as if she had been, which may just be a cultural difference. In the United States, it might not be as big of an issue, but in Japan, there might be more social constructs around gender. And lastly, Kelly had an ethnocentric attitude, and her family did as well, assuming that the Japanese living space would be the same as the Americans and or what she was used to. She assumed that when she moved, everything would be hunky dory, but she quickly realized that life was quite a bit different. So, question 2 is what stage of culture shock is Kelly's family experiencing? When they first got to Japan, they were in the honeymoon stage, obviously. However, this only lasted a few days given that Kelly had a tight work schedule and had a lot going on. But the honeymoon stage is where everything is great and you're experiencing this new culture and you really haven't, um, reality hasn't really sunk in yet. However, she quickly and her family also quickly moved on to the distress stage, um, which is the frustration they're experiencing. Her kids were upset because they don't have any friends at school and everything's different. The social norms, the way of doing things, everything from class to friendships to work. Um, Kelly's husband also was experiencing some distress because nothing was in the language he could read. He couldn't understand cooking instructions. The apartment they were living in was really small, even though the rent was expensive. But in Asian culture, especially in Japanese culture, living spaces tend to be smaller. So again, that was an ethnocentric idea that everything would be the same. And as Kelly and her family eventually moves out of the distress stage, they move to the adaptation stage, which I think for Kelly would look something like getting Japanese lessons so she could understand the people she's working with, and also potentially find expat groups or Americans living in Japan that she could be friends with and help reduce culture shock and bring some similarity to her and potentially find friends for her kid or her husband. And also just figuring out and learning about the social norms in Japan and learning to adapt to those if she intends on staying in Japan for work. Question 3 is, what, if anything, should have been done differently and by whom prior to Kelly accepting her new position in Japan? Well, I think Kelly should have firstly consulted with her family more to ensure her husband could actually find a job and her kids had a support system in place to adjust to their new life. Kelly had only a couple days to decide, and they quickly decided that they would move from Boston to Tokyo, which resulted in, like I mentioned, culture shock and lack of preparedness, a lack of social support and social family structure, I guess. And it became really difficult to be happy in this new, although exciting, place because they had not taken the proper steps leading up to moving there. Also, I think Kelly's boss should have given her more training about Japanese social norms and offered to put her through a Japanese language course to help her adjust her communication. Social norms and how we go about communication, especially with different cultures, is critical in business. And Kelly just really didn't understand how important it was. And this was evident in her in the way she communicated with her coworkers, her potential business clients, and that resulted in a poor presentation and losing the sale. And question 4 is, if I was Kelly, what should I do now? If I was Kelly, I would start learning Japanese and I would try to utilize my network to help my family adjust and perhaps getting uh, in contact with other Americans living in Japan, like I mentioned, to help ease her transition. And again, social norms is critical. So understanding that you're not the center of the world, you're not in the same culture that you once were. Your culture is no longer the dominant culture, so you have to adjust the way you see the world and how you talk to people and how you go about your life if you want to be successful. So if Kelly intends to stay in Japan and have a successful career there, she has to, one, learn Japanese, two, expand her network and find connections that will help her learn these social norms and the language, and really just take more time to learn about the people she's dealing with in business, because in Japan it's not a get down to business attitude, it's about developing relationships with your business partners and then pursuing a business transaction. That's it, and thank you very much for listening.